What's going on, guys? JPS back for another video, and today we're going to be reacting to how England's football league is breaking the sport. Now, on the topic of this, I have a friend who is very much invested in football, and he's been explaining a lot about it to me, all the different leagues in England and how that fits in with all the different football leagues throughout Europe, and he's just been explaining a lot to me. One thing he talked about, though, is oil money in the Premier League. And specifically with clubs like Man City and Newcastle, they have these wealthy individuals pouring money into the clubs, and it kind of turns it into a money scramble because clubs that don't have these people buying in aren't able to get the star players, and it just creates this disparity. So that's basically what I know. I'm not sure if that's what this video is going to be about, but one can only assume, so let's get right into this.
Stayed to chant after the game. Soon, these words were in articles all over the world because in just 1 month, Chelsea had spent 329 million euros on new players, more money than all the clubs in the French, Italian, German, and Spanish football leagues spent combined.
You have a club like Chelsea, and they think they can do everything.
I didn't know it was that type of money. God damn.
You have a club like Chelsea, and they think they can do everything. It's an extraordinary amount of money.
But it's what Chelsea's owners believed it needed to do in order to succeed in the most competitive, most popular, and richest football league in the world, the English Premier League.
The English Premier League, these sums of money are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
The problem is that the Premier League's clubs have grown so rich that the rest of Europe can't keep up.
It's very difficult to be competitive against English clubs. It is so far ahead of all the other leagues. The gap seems to be widening.
So how did the English Premier League get so rich? And how is that a problem for Europe's favorite sport?
All right, here we go. It's exactly what I was talking about before this. I'm ready. I want to know how this even, how are they letting this happen, bro? Well, money, we all know that, but jeez.
These aren't just goals, they are wonderful goals.
I need to start by explaining how football works in Europe. Starting in England around the 1860s, people began organizing official football clubs and playing each other. Eventually, they divided these clubs into a tiered system. The worst clubs played down in these leagues and the best up here. But clubs could move within this system. At the end of each season, the bottom 2 clubs in a league would be demoted to the league below, a punishment called relegation. But the top clubs would be promoted up.
It puts a competitive edge to everything.
This is James Corbett, a senior reporter at Off Pitch.
Effectively, you could have a village club that might be in tier 10 of English football, and if you do the right things, they could be playing in the first division within a decade. You do have those fairy tale stories.
Wimbledon, 6th in the first division in their first season in the top flight.
On the verge of a football fairy tale.
By the mid-20th century, these 5 leagues in the biggest 5 countries had most of the best players, and therefore the best clubs. But every year, the best club from every league would play each other in a big tournament, at first called the European Cup. It was an opportunity for clubs in any country to win big. In the 1980s, clubs from 16 different country leagues reached the semifinals, and in that period, a Portuguese, Dutch, and even a Romanian club won.
He's saved it again! He's unbeatable this and the Romanians have won the European Cup!
But football was about to change, and it began in England with a tragedy.
Oh, yeah.
On April 15th, 1989,
Hillsborough.
700 people were injured and 96 killed at a game in Sheffield, England, when poor crowd control and stadium design led to a stampede. It was the low point for English football after a disastrous decade. English stadiums were falling apart and attendance at matches was plummeting. And English clubs were banned from European tournaments after a fight between fans killed 39 in 1985.
Well, English football was a game in decline. You had rioting, you had hooliganism, you had racism. It was like an epicenter for all of society's ills.
Disputes between clubs and television broadcasters resulted in none of the English top leagues games airing on television during the 85 and 86 season. So many of England's best players fled to play in the other European leagues.
I didn't know it was like that, bro. Damn. That makes... Okay. learning a lot in this video. This is brilliant. Of course, I've heard of the Hillsborough disaster. It comes up very often, and it's a very integral part of English football history, but I didn't know that they weren't allowed to air any live games for 2 seasons. That's crazy.
England's best players fled to play in the other European leagues. By 1990, a few people were desperate to turn things around, specifically the owners of England's 5 richest and most popular clubs.
Arsenal, Tottenham Hotspur, Manchester United, Everton, and Liverpool.
Big clubs wanted a bigger share of broadcast revenues, centralized marketing. They saw the benefit of that in US sports, and essentially they saw an opportunity.
In 1992, they led a group of 22 clubs to break off and form a new league called the Premier League, and they designed it to be English football's resurrection.
It's a whole new ballgame.
The Premier League served as the new top league in English football. It controlled its own TV rights, which it sold for 427 million euros to a satellite TV company. Cash that the clubs then used to find new ways to make money and modernize the game. They renovated and built new stadiums that could fit more fans, and they started selling sponsorships and merchandise all over the world. But it was satellite TV that made the biggest difference, allowing the games to be broadcast to new audiences like in the US and Asia. The Premier League was able to more than double the price for its rights in 1997, and again in 2001.
It is one of the great success stories in global sport.
Crucially, the Premier League divided its TV revenue relatively equally between clubs, which made them more competitive. Spain, Italy, and Germany all gave more TV money to its most successful clubs, which let a few dominate year after year. By 2004, the Premier League had successfully turned English football around, becoming the wealthiest league in Europe, and some very rich people were noticing. Hey, I'm Sam Ellis, and welcome to Search Party. I'm gonna really quickly say thank you to today's sponsor, Incogni. He's a Russian businessman.
Some wealthy individuals noticed. It's like the start of everything, isn't it? Someone sees money and then it's not what it was anymore. And I guess that's where we're at now. It's breaking the sport, apparently.
This is Roman Abramovich. He's a Russian businessman who, back in 2003, was worth almost 10 billion euros. And he wanted to buy a football club. He settled on a West London club named Chelsea, which was in deep financial trouble. He paid around 199 million euros for the club and to relieve its debt, then immediately injected millions more of his own money to buy almost a dozen excellent players from clubs in the Premier League and across Europe. Even while the club lost money, he added more.
That was the big moment because he came in and he had a level of wealth that was just beyond anything that the Premier League had ever seen before.
Chelsea quickly won the Premier League in 2005 and 2006 and began consistently qualifying for and advancing deep into the All-European tournament, since renamed the Champions League. Abramovich proved that you could buy success in the Premier League, and it encouraged other owners to try it for themselves. Throughout the 2000s, a new class of wealthy and mostly foreign owners began buying and pumping millions into Premier League clubs. It helped that at first, the Premier League had very few rules on who could buy a club and how much they could spend on it.
Premier League has always been sort of quite non-interventionist. Any investment as good investment.
So these new owners began making the already rich clubs richer, while others boosted some smaller clubs into notoriety.
I knew Man City. Yep, Man City had to come in here, bro. That's where I heard about that oil money. Listen, my friend also told me, he was like, if a club is doing well, like Man City or Newcastle, then you just point to all the financial allegations or something like that. I still need to pick my favorite club. But this has made me think about it too. I'm like, damn, can I pick a club that just has a bunch of players brought in and they've just had a bunch of money pumped into it? Like, is that like an authentic club to me? I was thinking about that to myself. Like, what do you guys think about that? Do you think pumping all that money and bringing a bunch of, I mean, obviously the teams are going to be comprised of random players, but does it take away from the club? I think it does a bit, you know? It's not quite the same. But every club is going to have a bunch of money pumped into it. I don't know. Interesting questions.
Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan was a member of oil-rich Abu Dhabi's royal family, who in 2008 bought Manchester City.
Yeah, Man City moved it up another notch because you had the resources, not just the wealth, but the resources of a nation state.
He spent over 1.7 billion euros over the next 15 years on the best players, coaches, staff, and facilities from all over Europe. And of course, it worked.
Manchester City are the Premier League champions.
This strategy helped spark an arms race in the 2010s. Clubs started spending more and more each year to sign the best players and keep up with each other. While many of the rich clubs could afford to lose money on expensive players, many smaller clubs couldn't.
It created huge inflationary pressure, not just in terms of transfer fees, but in terms of player salaries. And they effectively pulled the rug from under the feet of other clubs.
And it became harder for clubs promoted into the Premier League to afford to stay there.
Clubs have massively overspent trying to get into Premier League.
In 2013, the Premier League adopted rules that were designed to encourage clubs to break even. But they didn't slow down the spending, because these clubs were in a lucrative cycle. As wealthy owners spent millions to bring the best players to the Premier League, more fans, especially international ones, wanted to watch it, which generated more TV money, which gave clubs more money to spend on more players.
Just keeps on going, yeah.
By 2022, the Premier League had 11 of the 20 richest football clubs in the world. And as far as revenue, the Premier League clubs brought in over 3 billion euros more than Germany and Spain's top leagues, and more than double France and Italy's. So by 2023, the Premier League was on a spending spree that Europe's other clubs just couldn't match. Something Chelsea made obvious in 2023.
Transfer deadline day, and Chelsea have locked down a British record transfer
spending of $357 million in January. La Liga president has launched a scathing attack. The British market is a doped market. This can jeopardize the sustainability of European football.
Do you think we're going to see a time when the Premier League's ever equal by any of the leagues?
By 2023, Europe's other leagues generated far less television money than the Premier League, but they also had more rules. Germany blocked ultra-wealthy owners from taking over its clubs, and Spain's league placed strict spending limits on its clubs. It often made these clubs healthier financially, but put most of them at a huge disadvantage when bidding for players against Premier League clubs, like Chelsea. The year before, new ultra-rich American owners had bought Chelsea, decided to splurge on new players, and were prepared to pay huge prices in order to outbid the other Premier League clubs. It offered 121 million euros for one player from Portugal's league, and 70 million for one in Ukraine's, plus millions more for another 6 players, totaling 329 million euros. That's more money than the annual revenue of most European clubs. So Chelsea got these players, and while its spending was extreme, even the worst Premier League clubs were outbidding Europe's major clubs. Southampton bought 5 players, including one from France for 25 million euros, and Bournemouth bought 3 players, including one for nearly 23 million euros from Ukraine. Essentially, Premier League clubs are buying up nearly all Europe's best players, and these clubs can't afford to stop them.
I know executives at what, by any measure, I would consider big clubs in, say, Germany, and they're very, very frustrated because every year they will lose their best players to an English club.
I see. So it's creating a huge imbalance. Yeah, it's not the best, bro. Dang. But how will this stop? That's my question, because it just seems like the more like money is dumped in, the more they're getting out, and the more it gets dumped in. Like, how are they going to break this cycle? They can't, right?
Some already rich and successful clubs in Europe are trying to match the Premier League spending, but it's caused Spain's Barcelona to spiral into a debt crisis, and Italy's Juventus was caught fudging its accounting. Europe's other clubs, meanwhile, are increasingly choosing to sell their best young players to Premier League clubs, meaning it's harder than ever for them to compete. You can see it happening most clearly in the Champions League tournament. Remember back in the 80s when clubs from 16 different countries made semifinals? In the past 10 years, it was just 6. And only these 6 clubs have won it. Playing in a major Champions League match earns a club millions, so when it's dominated by a handful of rich teams, they get even richer.
It definitely affects the competitive balance. Clubs from less significant European leagues, it is gradually forced them out.
This runaway wealth imbalance is why a few rich clubs, including 6 from the Premier League, tried to break away and form their own Super League back in 2021. An outcry by fans forced them to abandon the plans, but the problem didn't go away.
We talk in terms of European Super Leagues, but the reality is the Premier League is the European Super League.
And they've done it! They've done it! Manchester City have done it!
The Premier League has announced that it plans to install stricter rules that limit what clubs can spend on players, and it might be starting to enforce its rules better. In February 2023, the Premier League charged Manchester City with more than 100 violations of its financial rules.
This is what I was talking about. If someone is bragging about Man City, you can bring up all the charges. No hate to Man City fans. Let's not get it twisted here.
Stretching back as far as 2009. If found guilty, it could be relegated.
Oh.
But restricting spending could just make permanent the
Bro,
advantage.
but they got all the money to fight that in court. Like, they're not going to be relegated. Like, come on.
The rich clubs already have. But restricting spending could just make permanent the advantage the rich clubs already have. It's the Premier League's past willingness to let anyone own a club harder to fix.
Once you've opened yourself up to a nation state buying into your organisation, very, very difficult, if not impossible, to stop that.
Manchester City complete a historic treble.
And I'm not sure that it can be done.
And that's the first episode of Search Party. Hope you liked it. Glad to have you.
That was a great video. Video link will be in description, guys. Yeah, so my comment, I was asking, like, what can be done? So we have all this info. Premier League is taking over. It's already taken over. So is there ever going to be some balancing? And I don't know. But you know what I find interesting about this is this kind of mirrors real life. You got, on one hand, you have a very small group of wealthy individuals who continue to get more and more wealthy. We see that nowadays with inflation and people using all this as an excuse to just raise prices and take more money from everyone else. All the other clubs, everyone outside of the Premier League, out of the ultra wealthy, we're just left to figure it out, I guess. I don't know. And this hyper division between wealthy and regular people, I guess, just the gap continues to get larger and larger to where we are now. And coming into 2025 next year, the path that we're on, it doesn't look very good. I'm not just speaking from a football perspective, but also from a life perspective. Money has really taken over, and I'm wondering if we'll ever be able to take control back, because there has to be some type of event to occur, something that just is a catalyst for us to like change and actually make changes. Because the Premier League, they're like, oh, you know, we're gonna have some budgeting rules and that we're gonna implement. I mean, we saw that at the end of the video. Do you really think anything's gonna change like that, guys? No, it's not gonna change like that, bro. So listen, I'm not even too familiar with football. I'm an American football fan, but even I am passionate about this because I understand what's going on, and this video made it all very clear. If someone has never seen football in their life, they can watch this video and understand exactly what's happening. That's a sign of a really good video. And I just want to hear, what are your thoughts in the comments down below, guys? Please, I just really want to hear your thoughts. That's all. That's where I'm at this point. So yeah, amazing video. I think this opened up a lot of questions that I have, and I'm sure that you all have. So feel free to list them in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.